Hi, my name is Hannah Bradley from Cleveland, Ohio, and with our current pandemic and pending conversation on climate change, I had a question. What makes climate change so important, especially in rural areas? And what can COVID-19 teach us about the future of rural economies? To help answer this question, I had a talk with a senior policy analyst named Ryan Richards. What can climate change have on specifically rural areas?
Well, again, the effects of climate change on rural America, it really is going to vary by where you are in America or in the world. You know, in the West where it's drier, you'll see more frequent wildfires, and that's going to affect community safety. In the Midwest, where you see stronger storms, you know, in smaller towns, you see obviously smaller economies. They're typically less diverse, so a town in the Midwest is much more reliant on agriculture instead of a wide range of things like you'd see in a city. And so climate change is going to have an effect on the industries that are dominant in rural America, and that is going to adversely and very strongly affect those communities, more so than I think you would maybe see in other places.
And it's not just climate change threatening rural economies. COVID-19 forced many agricultural businesses to close and lose money. What will happen to these businesses if they aren't protected from disasters like COVID or climate change?
That's a great question. So I think what you're seeing now, is a broader, really, trend of vulnerability in rural communities that we need to recognize and take steps to address. This goes back before the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, after the recession in 2008, for instance, urban and suburban counties recovered economically much faster than rural communities did. And what that does is expose the fact that, you know, a lot of these rural communities are reliant on individual industries, for instance, meat packing or processing of other agricultural goods, or they're reliant on a small number of mills for, say, timber. Meat packing plants have been affected very significantly by COVID-19. And that can really bring a rural community to its knees. And I think it's important that right now we recognize these vulnerabilities and we take steps to help keep businesses in these rural places afloat.
COVID won't last forever, but vulnerable rural economies still have to face the economic threat of climate change. Is there a way that the government can help change climate change in rural areas?
So there's definitely a number of ways that the government can and should be helping rural America adapt to climate change. One way is obviously through investments in infrastructure, you know, helping rural communities adopt cleaner energy sources, for instance. But there's also really a lot of potential in rural America to help us reverse climate change, to pull carbon out of the air.
What can be learned from COVID to help us prepare for climate change?
So I think one important thing to take away from the COVID-19 pandemic is that, you know, it's really not that difficult to expose the vulnerabilities in our society. You know, that is vulnerable individuals, vulnerable populations within communities, and vulnerable communities themselves. And climate change is going to do exactly that at a scale that we really need to be prepared for. And so we need to be making these investments to help rural communities protect themselves in a future with a much different climate than we have today.
Thank you so much for talking with me today, Ryan.
Thank you so much for having me.